All right, today we're diving into one of the most unbelievable missions of the Second World War. We're talking about a raid so incredibly daring, its story is a wild mix of total success and just horrific tragedy.
So picture this, it's 1942, and you're an Allied planner. You're staring at a huge problem on the coast of France, a threat so big it could lose you the entire war in the Atlantic. Everything, all those vital supplies from America, hinges on you answering this one question. And this was the target. The Normandie dry dock at St Nazaire. I mean, look at that thing. It was an absolute engineering marvel, the biggest in the world. But more importantly, it was the only dock on the entire Atlantic coast that could handle Germany's monster warships.
So why all the fuss about one dock? Well, the story really isn't about the dock itself. It's about the reason it mattered so much. A single, terrifying German battleship, the Tirpitz. The Tirpitz was basically a floating fortress, this constant menace hiding out in the Norwegian fjords. You know, if that thing ever broke out into the Atlantic, it could have just ripped the Allied supply lines to shreds all by itself. But even this steel monster had an Achilles heel. If it got damaged, it needed a massive port for repairs.
And that's when the light bulb went on for the Allies. They realized if they could just destroy that one dock at St Nazaire, the Tirpitz would have no safe harbor on the Atlantic. The Germans would never risk sending their prize battleship into a shooting match without a garage to fix it up. The logic was brutal, but it was simple. Kill the port, and you cage the beast.
Okay, so you've got your target. But how in the world do you actually attack a place like St Nazaire? We're talking 250 miles from Britain, deep inside enemy territory and just bristling with guns. Any normal way of doing this seemed, well, impossible. It forced the planners to get seriously creative.
So they ran through the options. Bombing? Nope, the RAF just wasn't accurate enough back then. You'd flatten the town before you ever hit the dock gates. Okay, what about spies? No way, they'd need to carry literally tons of explosives. A full-on naval attack? That's just suicide, sailing big ships up a narrow, heavily defended river.
So with every sensible idea thrown out the window, they landed on something that was part naval assault, part commando raid, and, let's be honest, part suicide mission. They decided to turn an old ship into a giant floating bomb, and they called it Operation Chariot.
So they picked their sacrificial lamb, an old, outdated American destroyer called HMS Campbeltown. And then they started a pretty incredible makeover. The whole idea was to disguise it just enough to maybe fool the German defenders for a few crucial minutes. And this was way more than just a paint job. They performed major surgery on this thing. They stripped out everything they could to make it lighter for the shallow waters. They even lopped off 2 of its funnels to make it look like a German ship. And, of course, the most important part, they packed its bow with 4.5 tons of high explosives, all sealed in concrete. This thing wasn't a warship anymore. It was a guided missile with a human crew.
Now, the Campbeltown was the star of the show for sure, but it wasn't a solo act. Hundreds of commandos packed into tiny wooden boats were coming along for the ride. Their job was to hit the shore at the same time and just create absolute chaos, blowing up pumping stations, power generators, gun positions, everything. So, on March 28, 1942, after a super tense trip across the English Channel, this little fleet, 1 old destroyer and 18 small boats, slipped into the Loire estuary. The impossible plan was on. Their disguise bought them a few confusing minutes. But then, at 1:22 in the morning, bam! The whole world lights up as German searchlights find them. 6 minutes later, cover's blown, so they ditch the German flag and raise the British one. And then, under an absolute hurricane of gunfire, the Campbeltown puts the pedal to the metal for that final mile. I mean, they were sailing straight into a solid wall of fire. The port had dozens of anti-aircraft guns like this, plus bigger coastal cannons, all just hammering away at them from point-blank range. The whole scene was just this bizarre mix of terrible beauty and instant, brutal violence. Those little wooden boats the Commandos are in, they were just being shredded by the non-stop hail of shells. And then, at 1:34 a.m., against every possible odd, it happened. The Campbeltown hit its target dead on, ramming itself 33 feet deep into those massive steel gates. The main objective? Mission accomplished. But for the men, the fight was just getting started. Most of the little escape boats had been destroyed on the way in. The commandos on the shore knew they were trapped. Their commander, Lieutenant Colonel Newman, pulled the survivors together and gave them their orders. You either fight your way out of the town, or you fight until you have nothing left.
The gunfight in the town raged for a few more hours, but really, the raid was over. The commandos who were left were eventually captured, but the final, most devastating part of Operation Chariot, that hadn't happened yet.
See, hours after the attack, German soldiers and officials were crawling all over the captured British destroyer. And that's when the hidden explosives in the bow finally went off. The blast was immense. It killed over 360 people in an instant, and it didn't just damage the dock gates, it completely vaporized them.
But that success came at a staggering cost to the raiders. Of the 612 men who went on that mission, only about a third of them, just 228 guys, actually made it back to Britain. The rest were either killed in action or became prisoners of war.
The human price was just enormous. And looking at pictures like this, it really puts a face to those numbers, doesn't it? Just exhausted, wounded men being led off into captivity.
But that sacrifice was definitely not forgotten. In all that chaos, there were just these unbelievable acts of bravery. So many, in fact, that 5 Victoria Crosses, Britain's highest award for valor, were given out for this one raid.
So, despite the horrific losses, was it worth it? From a strategic point of view, absolutely. It was a stunning success. Before the raid, the Tirpitz threatened everything. After the raid, it never once sailed into the Atlantic. The dock at St Nazaire, it was completely out of action for the rest of the war.
In British military history, this is how Operation Chariot is remembered. It's held up as this perfect example of brilliant planning and incredible courage. But it really makes you think, doesn't it? When the price of winning is this high, what does success in war actually look like?